Diabetics, what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see your blood sugar. When we look at diabetes today, we often divide it into neat categories, type 1 and type 2, as if they live in completely different worlds. But when you step back and truly understand what's happening inside the human body, you begin to see that the principles that support healing, repair, and restoration are the same for both. Type 1 diabetes is commonly presented as irreversible, a condition where the pancreatic beta cells are damaged and unable to produce insulin. Type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, is usually the result of a lifestyle that has overworked the pancreas with years of high sugar, high carbohydrate eating. But here's the remarkable truth. Whether the cells are exhausted or damaged, the body responds to nourishment, rest, hydration, and balanced living with incredible resilience. This is why the same lifestyle guidelines that bring down blood sugar and ease the strain on a type 2 diabetic system can help lighten the load for someone with type 1 as well. The pancreas was never designed to handle the constant barrage of refined carbohydrates and sugars that have become everyday staples. When we keep pushing the body with these foods, it has to continually produce insulin just to move the glucose out of the bloodstream. Over time, the cells become tired, the insulin receptors become resistant, and the whole system starts to fall apart. That type 2 lifestyle-driven burnout. But even in type 1 diabetes, where beta cells are damaged, sometimes after infections, medications, or autoimmune triggers, the body still operates with the same principles. Cells can repair. Inflammation can reduce. Insulin sensitivity can improve. And importantly, insulin needs can drop dramatically. That's what we see over and over again. And that is why I always say that giving the body the right environment allows it to do what it was made to do: heal. The human body is governed by laws, and when those laws are followed, proper diet, pure water, sunlight, exercise, temperance, fresh air, rest, and trust in the process, the body begins to reorganize itself. The bloodstream becomes cleaner. The cells begin to respond again. The pancreas is no longer forced to work overtime. The digestive system gets a rake and can finally absorb nutrients efficiently. Even the damaged tissues begin to experience reduced oxidative stress and inflammation. These changes do not happen after one day, but the shift begins quickly and the direction of healing becomes unmistakable. Many people believe that because type 1 involves damaged beta cells, there is no possibility of improvement, but the body is always creating, repairing, reorganizing. Even partial recovery of function can change a person's life. When you remove the constant spikes of sugar and high carbohydrate foods, the body finally stops drowning in glucose. The insulin receptors begin to open up again. The muscles begin to burn fuel efficiently rather than storing it. The liver gets a rest from turning excess sugar into fat. The blood becomes more stable, and these improvements mean one thing: the pancreas is no longer under attack. It can begin to settle, to calm, to repair what it can repair. Lifestyle is powerful. A high-fiber, low-carbohydrate diet lowers the demand for insulin. Daily exercise increases insulin sensitivity and opens the door for glucose to move into the cells without requiring excessive insulin. Hydration supports the kidneys in clearing excess glucose. Salt helps the water move into the cells where it needs to be. Rest resets the stress hormones that otherwise keep blood glucose elevated. Even something as simple as going to bed early stabilizes metabolism. These are not small things. They are the foundations of healing. When you apply these principles, you begin to see the same patterns in both type 1 and type 2 diabetics. Blood sugar begins to stabilize. Insulin requirements begin to fall. Energy levels return. Inflammation drops. The body becomes lighter, calmer, more balanced. And in every case, it is because we are finally working with the body rather than against it. The body was never built for processed sugary foods, frantic schedules, and constant snacking. It was built for real food, movement, fresh air, and rest. When you restore those conditions, it responds beautifully. That's why I always say that even though the causes of type 1 and type 2 diabetes are different, the pathway to improvement is the same. You give the body the right fuel. You give the pancreas the rest it has been begging for. You stop overwhelming it with sugar and starch. You feed yourself things that stabilize rather than spike. You drink water. You add a pinch of salt so it can move through the body properly. You exercise to engage those glycogen stores that open up the cells. You sleep early so your hormones reset. You trust that the body knows what to do. These are not complicated guidelines. They are beautifully simple, and yet they are powerful enough to support someone with type 2 who has been on medication for years, or someone with type 1 who has been told their pancreas will never work again. The body responds to order, it responds to nourishment, it responds to consistency. And when you give it that, it begins to show you what it is capable of. When I tell the story of Dan, people often lean in a little lower because it challenges so many assumptions we have been taught about type 1 diabetes. Here was a young man, only 19 years old, who had been diagnosed with type 1 at 15 after a very strong course of antibiotics that damaged his pancreatic beta cells. He arrived with us taking 90 units of insulin a day, carrying the extra weight that so often comes with high insulin use, and believing that his condition was fixed, unchangeable, something he simply had to manage for the rest of his life. But when we began working with this, something remarkable happened, something that I have now seen many times. The body began responding almost immediately, even though he had been told that his pancreas could no longer produce adequate insulin. The moment he lowered the burden on his system by changing his diet, hydrating properly, moving his body, and giving his cells the right environment, the need for insulin started dropping. In the very first days, even while drinking vegetable juices, his blood sugar began falling too low. That might seem surprising, but what it showed was that his insulin dosage was already higher than what his body needed when it was finally given a clean, low-carbohydrate intake. Every night he had to reduce his insulin because his blood sugar kept dipping. At first, he used candies to bring it back up quickly, but the sugar rush gave him headaches. Later, he switched to apples, which worked more gently. And as he listened to the lectures and understood how his body functioned, he discovered that even exercise in the middle of the night could lift his blood sugar without food at all because his muscles released stored glycogen to meet the need. This is what I often remind people. Body is not a passive system. It actively adjusts, releases, builds, repairs, and compensates when you give it the right signals. As the days turned into weeks, Dan kept lowering his insulin because his body showed him that it no longer required such high amounts. When he supported his system with hydration, just water with a little salt to help absorption, his cells functioned more efficiently. When he allowed his digestive organs to rest by avoiding heavy evening meals, his blood sugar stopped fluctuating wildly. When he exercised in a way that activated his muscles, he unlocked the glycogen reserves that gave him stability without needing large doses of insulin. Every part of his routine was creating an internal environment that required less external intervention. By the end of 4 weeks, he had gone from 90 units to 10 units of insulin a day. That is not a small change. That is the body show us that even when we are told something is beyond repair, improvements can happen when the pressure on the system is relieved. Dan's story reminds us that the body wants to heal. It is always moving toward balance when we stop overwhelming it with foods and habits that sabotage its natural processes. Even in type 1 diabetes, where the root cause may involve damaged beta cells, the surrounding systems, cellular sensitivity, inflammation levels, metabolic balance, energy demand can all improve dramatically. And when those systems improve, the load on insulin drops, the fluctuations calm, and the person begins to take back control in ways they were told were impossible. One of the most eye-opening moments for people, especially those living with diabetes, is when they discover the incredible power of glycogen and how the body uses it to stabilize blood sugar without needing to eat anything at all. Most have never been told that inside every muscle cell are tiny bundles of stored glucose, almost like clusters of grapes, and these stores are there for one purpose: to give the body quick energy when it calls for it. This is why I always emphasize movement. When the body begins to move, really move, in a way that signals effort, the muscle cells immediately say, "I need fuel right now," and they open their little storage cupboards and pull out glycogen to keep the body go. This is what Dan discovered when his blood sugar dipped in the middle of the night. Instead of turning to candy or fruit, he dropped to the floor and did 30 push-ups. And when he checked his blood sugar afterward, it had gone on, even though he had not eaten a thing. The body had responded to the call for energy by releasing its own stores. That is the brilliance of the human design. When we understand glycogen this way, we also understand why exercise is so powerful for diabetics.
It isn't actually about burning calories or build muscle.
It is about unlocking the body's natural system for managing glucose. The signal assume the old way to raise low blood sugar is to eat something sweet, but the body has more than one pathway for maintaining balance. The muscles are the largest glucose storage units in the entire body, which means they hold tremendous power in stabilizing blood sugar. When we engage them with intention through brisk walking, interval training, resistance work, or even a set of push-ups, the muscles pull glucose from the bloodstream more efficiently, and they also release glycogen when needed. This dual action helps regulate highs and lows without relying entirely on food or medication. The key is understanding how the body communicates.
During movement, the cells do not wait for insulin to open the door. Exercise itself opens the door. This is why many diabetics see their blood sugar improve dramatically once they adopt consistent physical activity. Their cells become responsive again, not because more insulin is present, but because movement bypasses insulin resistance and lets glucose move smoothly into the cells. It is a natural built-in mechanism that works in harmony with the body instead of forcing it. And the more often you activate those glycogen stores, the more efficient the system becomes. The swings smooth out, the spikes lessen, and even the lows become easier to manage because the muscle cells are trained to respond quickly. This is what happened with Dan.
His body had been overwhelmed for years, burdened in by high insulin levels of constant fluctuations. But once he learned how glycogen works and began using his muscles deliberately, he unlocked a tool he never knew he had. He began to trust his body again. He began to see that his muscles carried answers no one had explained to him. The night he realized he could raise his blood sugar with push-ups instead of sugar was the night he understood that his body was not broken. It simply needed the right conditions to function the way it was created to. Dan Progress showed something that I have seen repeatedly. When the diet becomes clean, simple, low in carbohydrates, and rich in fiber and natural proteins, the whole metabolic system begins to settle. Many people underestimate the power of food because they've been taught that diabetes is only about medication and insulin adjustments. But the body is constantly responding to what we put into it. Every bite sends a message to the pancreas, the liver, the muscles, and the bloodstream. When those messages are chaotic, high sugar, high starch, constant snacking, the body is in a state of emergency all day long. But when you shift to balanced, stabilizing foods, the body finally relaxes. It stops fighting. It begins to work with you. And this is exactly what allowed Dan insulin needs to drop week after week. A low-carbohydrate diet is not a punishment. It is a relief for the entire system. When the bloodstream is not flooded with glucose, the pancreas does not have to scramble to produce insulin or process the excess. Instead, the body begins burning what it already has. The liver starts using stewing fat for energy. The muscles become more responsive to insulin and movement. The cells open their doors more easily. This creates a metabolic rhythm that is calm and efficient. Dan chose a very low carbohydrate approach because he was determined to give his pancreas as much rest as possible. His breakfasts were built on slow energy foods: sourdough spelt bread, avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, lentils. These foods do not spike blood sugar. They nourish. They soothe. They provide steady fuel that lasts for hours. His lunches followed the same pattern, full of leafy greens, legumes, tofu, and low-glycemic vegetables of cauliflower, broccoli, and sweet potato. These foods gave his body the minerals, fiber, and plant proteins it needed without burdening the bloodstream. And then at night, when digestion should slow down naturally, he kept it simple with broth. This is something many people don't know. Your digestive organs need rest just as much as your muscles and your mind do. Eating heavy meals at night keeps the pancreas working when it should be winding down for repair and recovery. When Dan shifted his eating to earlier in the day and allowed his evenings to be peaceful and light, his blood sugar stopped crashing at night. His insulin became easier to manage because the body was not battling late-night glucose surges. Hydration played a powerful role too. Water helps carry nutrients into the cells and allows the kidneys to flush out excess glucose. A pinch of salt helps that water move inside the cells, where it can free up glycogen and support energy production. Without this, cells become dehydrated and sluggish, and blood sugar becomes unstable. Movement tied everything together. His cells opened more easily. His muscles used glucose more efficiently, and his glycogen stores responded when needed. The beauty of Dan diet was that it was not extreme, it was intentional. It focused on foods that nourished the cells instead of shocking them. It rested the pancreas. It stabilized energy. It made insulin more efficient. And little by little, day after day, the body responded.